So, why do we do spring fling? Like all those games and everything I just talked about, why do we do that? Is it just to kind of give us a break during the spring and have some fun? And, I had someone ask me why we did spring fling just this week, and it got me thinking. And so tonight, that's the question I want us to answer. Because a lot of you have never been a part of this, and you may be asking that same question now, like, what is this? Why are we doing this? And so I want us to just go through and look at why we do spring fling. But I also want us to look and see what it's going to take from each and every one of us in order for it to be what I consider a success. And so what it takes is this, and it's the title of our message, and it's very simple. One word: urgency. We've got to have a sense of urgency. And so that is what we're going to talk about tonight. Urgency. And I'm going to show you urgency in two forms. The first one is this: we've got to have an urgency to share the gospel with others. This is something you're told if you've grown up in church pretty much since you could comprehend anything, right? Share the gospel. That's what we're here to do, is share the gospel, right? You hear that all the time, but what does that mean? Right? Maybe you're sitting in here and you don't even know what the gospel is when I say share the gospel. Like, what am I going to share? Like, I don't know what that is. Well, if that's you, then the gospel very simply is this. It's that Jesus Christ came to this earth, right? Born of a virgin, and he lived 33 and a half perfect years, never sinned once. And because of that, it made him the only person in the history of the world there ever has been and ever will be that could pay the price of sin. Because Scripture tells us all have fallen short of the glory of God, except Jesus, because he was the Son of God. And so he lived that perfect life. But because he lived that perfect life, it meant he had to die a death that he didn't deserve. Because he had done no wrong, he had no sin in his life, but he chose to go and die on a cross for you and for me because he loved us that much. He knew he had done something that none of us could ever do. We could never pay the price for that sin on our own. And so he chose to go and die, to bleed on a cross for you, because he saw you in this very moment and said, I love you enough to die for you, so that you might know my love, that you might know my Father's love and spend eternity with him. And we know that he didn't just die, but that he was buried in a tomb. And he stayed there for 3 days, but luckily for us, he didn't just stay in that tomb. While he was buried, he went and he defeated sin, death, hell, and the grave, and he rose to life again. And now because of that fact, you and I have the chance at reconciliation with the Father, meaning that we can accept that gift, that price that has been paid that we couldn't pay, no amount of good that we could do, but we can accept that free gift and enter into a relationship with the Father. That is the gospel. And we start preaching the gospel in church as often and as early as possible. And why do we do that? Why do you think you can go into any church in here? We've got to be sharing the gospel. You need to go and share the gospel. Why? Because it's important. We've been called by God to share his love with the world around us that we see every single day. We are called to share this. We are to show Christ and expose a lost and a broken world to how awesome our God is, how powerful he is, and to tell them the truth that they can experience freedom with him. That is our purpose. And we see this in Matthew 28. This is verse 19. Some of you may know this as the Great Commission, but it says this. It says, go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations. We've been commanded by God to go and make disciples. Both of those are action words. Go and make. Share the gospel. You are to go and share Christ with the world. And so tonight, I just simply want to beg of you guys to not put this off, but to take this literally, that this is your job. This is your mission, to go and to share Christ with the people around you. Because when God says to go, we need to go. We can read all throughout Scripture what happens when people try and run from what God is calling them to. And I'll give you a hint. It doesn't turn out well for really any of them. If God is commanding us to do something, we better do it. This isn't a suggestion when he says go and make disciples. We are called to action, and we need to respond with action. But so often this is what we do. We lie to ourselves and we say that people will hear the gospel from somewhere else, from someone else. Maybe you go to a Christian school and you say, man, they'll hear that at chapel. We've got people come in here all the time. You have to take a Bible class here, man. They'll hear it from somebody else. I don't have to worry about that. Or you just say, man, I'm not a pastor. That's not my job. They can take care of that. I'll invite them to church, and that'll be like, I've done enough. But listen, if you call yourself a believer of Christ and you claim to serve Christ with your whole life, then it is your job. You cannot put this off on somebody else, on anything else. This is for you. Every single one of us that calls ourselves a believer, this is our job. People go through life searching for their calling, searching for their purpose, but I'm telling you, it's right here. Your calling and your purpose in this life is simply to glorify God and to make him known to everyone around you. You give him your life first, and you glorify him with that, and then you share that with every single person you come in contact with. Don't allow yourself to be deceived into believing that it's not your job, that someone else will do it for you. Because all that is an excuse for you to not get uncomfortable. All it is giving you a way out of this great commission that we've been given by Christ. And we do this for so many reasons. Maybe because you know if you start sharing Christ in your school, people are going to start holding you to a little bit of a higher standard. They're going to start watching you a little bit closer if you start making it known that you're a Christian. You're not going to be able to get away with anything before, because now they know you've put that label of Christ on yourself. You better be able to back it up. Or maybe you just don't want to get uncomfortable. You just want to take it easy and stay in this little bubble that we've made for ourselves, our comfort zone. And we don't want to have to get uncomfortable and talk about Christ in our school or on our team. Because I don't know how they'll respond to that, so I'd rather just not. Because if I start doing that, if I start proclaiming Christ, there's a million what-ifs that are going to fill my head. What if they reject me when I share Christ? What if they make fun of me? What if these people that I call my friends stop inviting me to hang out? I stop getting invited to the parties. I stop getting invited to go eat after the game. I start to notice my circle get a little bit smaller. What if that happens? And while those seem like just the scariest outcomes, all these what-ifs that could go wrong, I've got an outcome that is far scarier than any of those what-ifs. And this is it. The reality is this. There's people in your school, in your classes, on your teams who don't know God. That's a true statement. What's also a true statement is that those people right now are headed for an eternity apart from him in a place called hell. That is the reality that some of the people in our lives are facing right now. The people in our lives, there's some of them that may never come to know Christ as their personal Lord and Savior. And that should be the scariest what if that can fill your mind. That should be the motivation that drives you past those what ifs, past those fears of getting uncomfortable. Is yes, what if they reject me? But also on the flip side, what if they get in a car wreck on the way home and go to hell? Because I didn't share with them. That is our motivation, to push past every fear that fills our mind. And I know that's heavy. And it's a lot to wrap your mind around, but it is so crucial that we understand how important the gospel is and how important it is that we share with every single person that we meet. Because there is only one way to the Father. There's only one way to spend eternity with him, and that is through Jesus. It is through the gospel, and if we don't share it, there's no guarantee that they'll hear it. And I say this because I know you need to hear it. And I know that because I sat exactly where you did. And I did exactly what I'm talking about. I sat here in this same room, this same building at Golden Acres Baptist Church, week after week after week, and I heard messages preached. And I heard them, but I never took it to heart. And what I did was I left those messages, I left those feelings of being fired up for God. I left them here. I went back to school, and I did what I wanted to do. I did what would make me popular, what would make me fit in and get invited and all those things. Because I was unwilling to fully commit to God's calling to go and share. I was friends with a lot of people who, looking back on it now, were not living for Christ. Who I have no guarantee are saved. Because if we just look at the fruits of their life, I would say they're not living for God and they don't have a personal relationship with Him. These were my close friends who I know needed to know Christ. And it would have been so easy for me to just invite them to church. But instead, I did nothing. I kept my mouth shut and I went through the motions and I did the same things they were doing. And I kept Jesus in this box that could only be opened at church. Never shared Him with the people that I said were my best friends. I never once was willing to step out in faith, to actually put my faith into action and share with these people. The importance of a relationship with Jesus should trump every fear that you have. Because the sad reality is this: I no longer have the opportunity that I did in high school to share with those people. The people who are my closest friends, I'll be honest, I've got no contact with any of them. Simply because we graduated, we went our separate ways, we grew up, got married, some of them have kids, and we're just not friends. I don't see them every single day like I did in high school. Something you'll learn in life, if you haven't already, is that people are only in your life for a season. So don't waste the opportunity you have right now to share Christ with them. I know you may not see it and you may not realize it, and these may be your boys for life and nothing's going to separate us. I said all that same junk, and here we are. You're in class with the people you are for a reason. You're on a team with the people that you are for a purpose. Nothing in this life happens by accident. So if you live your life with urgency, live it in a way that reflects Christ. Be willing to get uncomfortable for the people that you say you love, but you know they don't know Christ. For those of us who claim to be believers, we should be so broken-hearted for those that don't know God, that are lost, that we can't help but share Christ with them because we know the outcome of if they don't accept it. So maybe you hear that, and you're inspired, and you're willing, and you're ready. You're like, yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm going to share Christ. But maybe what's held you back is not the fear of rejection, but maybe it's just simply feelings of inadequacy. Like, man, I don't know how to share. I don't know how to start those conversations. This is why we do Spring Fling. To give you an easy way to start the conversation for Christ. To start simply with inviting them to church. And you don't even have to say the word church. You can just say, hey, we're having a flower fight. You should come. And then they ask, why? And you introduce church to them. But I'm going to challenge you with this. Don't just invite them to church, but share Christ with them. Because sometimes we think just inviting them to church is enough because they'll come here and then they'll hear it from me. And you still get to be comfortable. No, you've got that calling on your life. But this is what Spring Fling is for, to give you an unintimidating invite to a non-believer. Because if you just say, hey, come to church with me, if I'm not a Christian, I'm not interested. But if you say, hey, come to church with me, we're going to throw flour at each other or spray each other with shaving cream, I might come. So use this. Don't just enjoy it and think this is fun and we're going to spend it with the people that are here. Use this to get people to church. Be intentional with your conversations. Be confident in your conversations, and know that when you share your faith, you're serving the Lord and you're doing what He's called you to do. There's no rejection they can give you that will take away who Christ says that you are. And guys, I'm telling you, this works. Like, it's proven to work. Last year during Spring Fling, we saw 19 first-time guests in the span of 3 months. That is crazy. 19 people who had not only never been to this church, but who may have never been to any church before. But they were willing to show up for this. And whether they ever come again or not, whether they came just for that or not, they left having heard the message of Jesus Christ at least one time in their life. Being presented with the opportunity to respond to the gospel at least one time. And so I can promise you, every single night, no matter what the activity is, the gospel is going to be presented. Because that is why we do everything that we do. And so it's your job to get them here. Because you're in class with them. I'm not. You're on the team with them. I'm not. So it's up to you to get them here, to share Christ with them. Because we often call the gospel the good news, right? I'm sure a lot of you have heard that before, the good news of Christ. Well, let me tell you, the good news of Christ is only good news if they hear it in time. The good news for someone that you never share it with is not good news. It's only good news if you're willing to share it and take it to them. But I'll tell you what, the good news of the gospel has the power to change our lives. It had the power to change mine. And if you call yourself a believer, then it had the power to change yours. And if you don't, then let me tell you that it has the power to change yours. And it has the power to change anybody out there. No matter how bad you think they are. It could be the worst kid in your school. I don't care what they do. The gospel of Jesus Christ has the power to change their life. And so if we believe that, we need to have urgency. Because you have been called to go and make disciples. To share this gospel. That is our purpose. Do not let your circumstances determine if you're going to invite them, if you're going to share the gospel. Because if you do that, if you wait for someone to just walk up and be like, hey, will you tell me about Jesus? That's probably not going to happen. It may, but it's probably not. If you just wait for this perfect little situation to happen, I'm telling you, it rarely ever happens that way. You can't leave sharing the gospel up to chance. You've got to build your life around it and be intentional about sharing. So whether you realize it or not, everything we do, especially during Spring Fling, is for a purpose. Every shaving cream fight, gross games, they're all just methods for us to share the gospel, to love people who are broke and who are hurting and who wouldn't come to church otherwise. And so don't mistake the reason behind Spring Fling of just all fun and games. Don't get so caught up in all the fun that you forget the reason why we're doing what we're doing. Don't get so caught up in it that you waste this opportunity to reach people for Christ. Because this time of year is packed with events and with fun stuff, but it can also be the very thing that opens the door to change somebody's eternity. But that only happens if we have urgency. And so be intentional with every invite, with every conversation, with every moment that you have. So we have an urgency to share. And then the second urgency we're going to look at is an urgency to answer God's call for you. If we look at Scripture, Peter and most of the other apostles were fishermen. That's what they did for a living, and that's what they were doing when Jesus comes to them in Matthew's Gospel. And so if we read in Matthew 4, this is verses 18 through 20. It says this, it says, and Jesus, walking by the Sea of Galilee, saw two brothers, Simon called Peter and Andrew his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. Then he said to them, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. Then it says, immediately they left their nets and they followed him. This is the invitation of Jesus. He's inviting us to follow him. Because I'm telling you, no matter how you feel right now in this moment, God has a purpose for your life. God led you to exactly where you are right now for a purpose. You wouldn't be sitting in this room if you were not called by God and brought here by God for a reason. That's true of your life. God has a purpose for our life. You were not made by accident. You have a purpose and a calling from God. And so notice the response of Peter when he hears this call from Christ. It says they immediately left their nets and followed him. Right? Immediately. Right? He had a sense of urgency. Right? I think for us it's that kind of like when I check my phone and I have 12 missed calls from my mom kind of urgency of like one missed call, ain't nothing serious. I may call him back tomorrow. But if I see 10, 12 missed calls from Michaela or from my mom or somebody, like, I'm going to drop what I'm doing and I'm going to call them back right now because I don't know what's going on. It's that level of urgency of like something is happening. I can't waste any time. I've got to do this now. That's what these guys had. They didn't sit around and be like, yeah, let us have lunch first and then we'll follow you. We'll catch up. They didn't say, well, let us get to that first thing in the morning. We've been fishing all day. We're tired. Let's go catch a shower, sleep. We'll catch up. It says they dropped their nets immediately and followed after him. Do you see the sense of urgency? Not only did they follow Christ, but it says they left their nets. And we read that, it's like, all right, why is that important? Guys, this is signifying their complete surrender of their old life into God's hands. They left their source of income. They were fishermen and they left their nets behind, their livelihood behind, to follow Christ wholeheartedly, not going back to their old life. There was no going back for them. They didn't take their nets home, fold them up all nice, put them in the closet and say, we'll come back to that later. They didn't take them and store them somewhere safe as a backup plan if this Jesus thing doesn't work out. It says they left them behind. No going back to the way that things were, but following God and being sold out no matter what the outcome. So why do we need to answer God's call with a sense of urgency? Romans 13 tells us this. It says, and do this, knowing the time, that now it is high time to awake out of our sleep. For now our salvation is nearer than when we first believed. And I think the wording here is so appropriate. Because it says to awaken out of your sleep. And guys, that is exactly what some of us are doing in life right now. We're going through life asleep. And what I mean by that is not simply that you're sleeping through my message, which some of you may be, and that's okay. But you're going through life just sleepwalking. And what I mean is you found this rhythm where you wake up every day and you just go through the motions. You know exactly what tomorrow is going to be like in the next day because it's what you did today and yesterday. And you're stuck in this rut, and some of you don't even realize it. You don't realize it because you've gotten comfortable with this routine, this pattern that you go through life in. But hear me, at some point in this life, you've got to be willing to wake up. You're going to have to wake up. Step out of that little comfort zone that you've made. Step out of our bubble and actually be willing to wake up and do something. Follow the calling of God on our life. Actually be willing to put some skin in the game and not just say that gospel stuff is for somebody else. Actually be willing to get involved, to get uncomfortable for Jesus, to get off the bench and get into the game, right? To actually begin to put our faith into action, to step out and to trust God. And so my question is this, and this is how I'll close. It's, will you answer God's call? That calling to drop everything and follow after him. Because I'm telling you, God is calling you. He's calling you. And those of you who don't know him right now, he's calling you to follow after him. The only thing stopping you from having life and life more abundant, as promised in Scripture, is you and your own fears. So are you willing to let go of that life that you've held onto so tightly? Willing to let go of those fears and surrender this life fully to God? Are you willing to surrender the things that you know are ungodly in your life? The sins that you just can't let go of because they feel good for a moment. And society and social media and the world tells us these things are important and valuable and they're okay. Will you surrender those things to God? Let go and pursue Him with reckless abandon. Because if you do, He will elevate your life to levels that you can't even imagine. But this rut, this routine that you found yourself in, just going through the motions, is going to be deadly. If we continue to put off this calling, to surrender our lives and follow after God, one day it may be too late. If we keep saying we'll do it when we're older, if we keep saying not now, not tonight, next week, one day it's going to be too late. That verse in Romans 13 says that our salvation is nearer than when we first believed. And what that means simply is that Jesus is coming back. We know this for a fact. It's going to happen. And now we don't know when, but we know that He's coming. And so knowing this very fact of life, wouldn't you say that it's wise for us to focus on our one main goal of life, which is to know God and to make Him known? If we don't know how much time we have, why waste a second of it? When God calls us, we need to answer immediately. Guys, we cannot delay this any further. The calling to follow God with your whole heart, surrendering your whole life to Him. Or if you're a believer, the call to share. We cannot put that call off any longer. It is time that we do something for the kingdom of heaven, that we go and we make a difference, that we go and we look different than the people around us who have never been to church before. It's time that we stop blending in with the crowd and actually stand up, stand out, and make a difference for God. And I'm telling you, we have leaders in this room who love you, who are here for you, and who want to pray with you, and who can talk with you through this, and who can help you. And you should know them because they were in your groups. So if you need that tonight, if you need someone to just listen to your story, if you need someone to help you understand those next steps, to pray with you because you have questions about following God, anything, find one of them and talk about it. Don't leave it here like I did, but do something with it. And if you've already made that decision to follow after God, but you know you can be doing more to share, then again, go to God in prayer. Ask Him to embolden you and strengthen you and give you the courage to stand up and stand out. To put those what ifs behind us, because the reality is the one what if that is scarier than anything is the people that we pass in the hallway every single day, dying, never having heard the good news of Christ. So my prayer is this, is that going forward, we'll share the gospel with urgency. And we'll use Spring Fling for God's glory. That is what will make it a success. I don't care how many people show up throughout the whole thing. But if one person comes to know Christ through an invitation to Gross Games or from Shaving Cream Fight, then it's a success. That's the only measure that we use for success. Is how many people are coming to know Christ through what we're doing. But it's up to you to have that sense of urgency, to go and share, go and make disciples. And so however the Lord is leading you in this moment, whatever calling you feel, whatever it is you're trying to push away and ignore, I encourage you to lean into it, to respond in this moment however the Lord is leading you.